Hi everyone, welcome. I am Colin Hanks with the Oracle Applications Users Group. Welcome everyone to this session of OAUG e-Learning, the Public Sector and Higher Education Series, Cloud Reporting, Tips and Tricks. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a couple housekeeping items. You will be on mute throughout this presentation. If you would like to ask a question, please type it into the questions box in your control panel at any time. Once the presentation has concluded, I will read the questions back so the presenter can respond. Just as a reminder, we are recording this session. It will be available on the OAUG website under the e-learning page within the next 24 hours. And now I'd like to introduce your presenter, Thomas Simkiss with Creoal Consulting. Thomas, how are you today?
Doing very well, Colin. Thank you very much.
No problem.
All right. So we're going to get started. So thank you, Colin. So this is Cloud Reporting Tips and Tricks. This is the third session in three that Creoal Consulting did in partnership with Novus on the use of Oracle Cloud in public sector and higher ed. The first sector focused on general business flows and how applicable they are to using cloud in public sector and higher ed. The second session focused on planning and budgeting. RJ Linehan of Novus gave some examples of planning and budgeting and some specific use cases around public sector. This section is going to focus on just reporting and how you can use some of the standard Oracle tools that are available in Oracle Cloud to do reporting. So we'll do a little bit about presenter about Creoal, where they're going to go into reporting options in the cloud. We'll go through some installation. That's a very tactical section, so we'll go through that pretty quick. We'll then talk about Financial Reporting Studio tips and tricks. Financial Reporting Studio is the tool that you use to get pixel-perfect boardroom quality reports out of Oracle Cloud. We'll then talk about SmartView. That is an Excel plugin that works with Oracle Essbase, which is embedded in Oracle General Ledger. That's where all the cloud balances are stored. And finally, we'll touch on OTBI and InfoLets. So a lot of information crammed into this session. We'll try to get through it as much as possible. Certainly, if you have questions, as Colin said, please do pose them, and we'll try to get to as many as we can at the end. So a little about the presenter about Creoal. My name is Thomas Simkiss. I've been doing this for 22 years, quite a long time. My hair was a lot less gray when I started this. I've done over 60 full-cycle implementations in Oracle EBS. Started out on 10.7. Have done a few implementations all the way up to 12.2. I've also done 15 full-cycle cloud implementations. So soup to nuts, architect, project manager, solutions architect, senior business analyst. I've played a lot of different roles. I'm certified in Fusion General Ledger and Fusion Payables. I am also an Oracle ACE. From OUG sponsorship perspective, I'm the co-chair of the Multinational Special Interest Group. Do a lot of presentations. Was recently named Presenter of the Year at the Collaborate Conference in Vegas. I'm a CPA in New Jersey, and I'm also an attorney in Pennsylvania and New Jersey, and I'm a member of the American Bar Association. Creoal Consulting is who I work for. We are headquartered in Bethesda, Maryland. We focus on applications and technology in the public sector, federal government, and the commercial space. Have designed some custom tools to do integration for Oracle and integrating with Oracle databases. And we have just recently gotten into the cloud space within the last 12 months, but we are working on a number of cloud projects right now. We're assisting a consulting company right now doing some work out in Kansas. Okay, so a little reporting options in the cloud. What are we looking at? What do we have? So from a financials perspective, and that's really what this presentation is going to focus on, there's a number of tools that we can utilize across the applications, whether it's HCM, CX, or sales, or supply chain that you can utilize. From a financials perspective, there really are four main tools. Financial Reporting and SmartView focus on general ledger balances. Those tools sit on top of the Essbase cube, and they allow us to do multi-dimensional analysis. So each chart of accounts member is a dimension or a way that we can slice and dice data. Period is a dimension. Accounting scenario. All those different things, we can bring them into FRS, Financial Reporting Studio, or into SmartView. SmartView is better for ad hoc and Excel analysis, whereas, as I said earlier, boardroom quality reports, Financial Reporting Studio is the one we want to use. Transactional data, we can use OTBI or Oracle Transactional Business Intelligence, or we can also use good old BI Publisher. So those tools can point against any data source. They can also point against custom data sources. You can use custom SQL. It is a common misconception that you can't write your own SQL statements in cloud. That is incorrect. You absolutely can create your own custom SQL statements. And you can use OTBI or BI Publisher to extract and utilize that data sources. All right, a little bit about installation. I want to go this relatively quickly, but it is important because a lot of people do get confused. Release 11 is the oldest release of Oracle. The current release of Oracle Cloud is release 12. So a lot of you folks may be getting ready to upgrade or have already upgraded. Bear in mind that the versions do change. So if you have tools installed from release 11, you will need to uninstall them and install the new tools for release 12. So if you go to Financial Reporting Center, this navigation is the same in 11 as it is in 12. Click on Tasks on your right-hand side. You're going to open up a separate window, and you'll have a section under there called Tools. From there, you can install SmartView. You can also install Financial Reporting Studio. I will note, and there's a note about this coming up later on, Oracle is slowly de-supporting the client-side installation of FRS, and there is a web version. If you're using any of the Edge products like Planning and Budgeting Cloud Service or Financial Close Consolidation, you already have access to use the web version of Financial Reporting Studio, so you're a little bit ahead of the game. Once you download and install the tool, how do you connect? There's generally speaking 2 URLs that you'll get when you buy Oracle Cloud, unless you buy an Oracle test environment. So you'll have an environment that'll have your pod name with a dash of test or dev, depending upon which pod you're using. And your prod will just have your pod name with no test or dev increment. And you have to put that in your URL to connect to FRS. In SmartView, once you've installed the tool, there'll be a SmartView ribbon at the top of your Excel sheet. If you click on Options, click on Advanced, you can enter that URL. Now, there are some things that you need to enter after the URL in SmartView. You have to enter the port, which is :443, and then SmartView Analytics. Once you do that, you'll be able to click on the panel button, and you'll bring up your connections. There's 2 different kinds of connections, shared connections and private connections. Private connection is a locally defined connection. You can actually use that connection to connect directly to some of the OTBI layers. And use use Microsoft Excel to bring data back. But private connection is a little bit beyond the scope of this session. So we'll focus on the shared connection. Once you connect, you have several different cubes to which you can utilize. You will, at the bare minimum, have 1 cube for each chart of accounts that is active in your environment. So if you have 3 charts of accounts, you'll have at the minimum 3 cubes. You could have 3 ledgers, but if they've got the same chart, you'll still only have 1 cube. So the chart structure is really what determines the number of cubes that you have. Some additional cubes that you may see are cash position. Cash positioning was introduced in Release 11. It's coming forward and enhancing in Release 12. You'll be able to do cash forecasting as well. There will also be a project accounting cube if you're running Oracle projects. So you can run Essbase against any of those cubes. Oracle has configured that, and you can use SmartView to do your analysis. If you click on the GL Balances cube and connect, it will bring back your default dimensions, and then you are connected. So we'll talk a little bit about FRS tips and tricks. We'll talk a little bit more about SmartView a little bit later on. So Financial Reporting Studio, this is really your boardroom quality report. If you're doing ad hoc, it's not really what you want to do, but the thing about FRS is with your dimensions, you can write the report for 1 set of companies or 1 set of cost centers, and as long as they're in the appropriate place in the report, which is in the point of view space, you can change those. So if you write a report that lists all cost centers and you'd like to limit it to only 1, you can certainly do that through the Financial Reporting Center within Oracle Cloud. So it's not nearly as limiting as it would seem to be, and even though it is not really meant for ad hoc, it is very powerful, and it does generate some real great reporting that you can distribute to end users or to the web. So it is a desktop client, and this is kind of what I was talking about at the start of the presentation. As of May, they're going to stop supporting it. So Oracle's rolling out the web version, and I believe in 12 that the web version is available. So if you have the desktop version installed, you no longer have to go through the pain of getting it working release after release. Oracle will do that when you upgrade to the next release of Oracle Cloud. So great thing that they did for everybody there. This is what it looks like. So I have one slide of Cloud, and the only reason I go one slide is because when I did the presentation, I was using the client-side version. The good news is that the same functions are available. So Oracle, the Cloud version of FRS, works exactly the same as the client-side version. You just don't have to go through the install. All right, Financial Reporting Center. Financial Reporting Center is embedded within Oracle Cloud. So once you have built your reports using FRS, you can access and run them from Financial Reporting Center. On the upper left-hand side, there's a drop-down. Those are some of the ways that you can get data using FRS out of Oracle. So HTML, PDF. You also have something called Export to Excel. Export to Excel will take the report and dump it into Excel, and what that means is it's dead at that point. So if you book a journal entry and you had done an export to Excel, the data will not be refreshed. If you export in query ready mode, that essentially fires up the SmartView plug into Excel. The nice thing about that is if you export a report in query ready mode, you do lose your formatting. Benefit of exporting to Excel is you keep your formatting. If you export in query ready mode, you'll lose that formatting. But it is hot data, so that means you can run a report. If somebody books a journal entry and posts it, you can hit refresh in that export, and it's going to pull that data back. You can also export to Word and PowerPoint. Those will keep your formatting. You can do something called showing annotations. Annotations are used for making notes on a particular set of data. So if you run a financial report for Cost Center 100, period October, and you put a note on the revenue line that revenue was high this month because of X, if someone were to run that same report months from now for Cost Center 100, period October, and they were to look at that revenue line, that note would show up, and they don't have to go back and figure out why revenue was high that month. You've already done the work, and it shows on the annotation. You can do a refresh. You can preview a point of view, which is if you're going to change dimension, and then, of course, you can respond to prompts. All right, so how do we create a report in FRS? Once you open a tool and connect, it's going to open up a blank workspace. You can either go File, New, or you can use the menu on the report, and it creates a grid. The thing about FRS, and whether it's the web version or the desktop version, it is WYSIWYG. So WYSIWYG is an old term, means what you see is what you get. So if you're creating a report, you should try to bear in mind who the audience that will be consuming it and how they intend to consume it. Meaning, if you're going to create a report that you intend to print and put in a board package or intend to disseminate, then if the report is built on 8.5 by 11 within the tool, that's exactly how it'll print. However, if you're building a report that's a consolidating income statement that's going to have 100 companies across top, you don't necessarily have to worry about the pages so much unless you're going to print it. If you're going to print it, you're going to be limited to the page dimensions of 8.5 by 11. If you put it out to HTML or Excel, it'll obviously show up on a single worksheet or workbook. Once you insert your report, you then can insert text. That is how you would do a report label. You literally draw it. So when you insert text, you have the option of drawing an area. So this area in white with the blue boxes on it was drawn with a cursor. And then you can actually insert the text. You can type or you can insert functions. So if you want to type hard code income statement, you can do that. There are also functions that draw the name dynamically. You can also use those functions to insert dynamic period values, company values, or any dimension values so that the report title is dynamic rather than stagnant. Once you do that, it's really just formatting. If you look in the upper right-hand screenshot, you can see a B, an I, and an underscore U. Those should look familiar to anybody that's ever used Microsoft because those are exact same commands that are available in Microsoft. So if you want to use bold, you use the B. If you want to use italics, you use the I. So all your formatting really is exactly like it is in Microsoft. Once you do that, you can insert what's called a grid. A grid contains all the dimensions within your Essbase cube. Everything will start out in the top area, which is called the point of view. Point of view contains all the dimensions. Anything that you leave in point of view can be changed by the user at report runtime. So leaving accounting period up top, we can run this report for different accounting periods. You can also change ledger. Anything that is in the pages, you'll have to pick those things and set them, and they will not be able to be changed by the user point of view. It matters what order you drag things in. So if you drag company in the page dimension and you want that to be your top page, you would need to drag that in first. If you wanted product to fall below company, you have to drag it in second. If you decide that you want to reorder those, the only way you can do it is you have to drag all those products out from the dimension that you have them, whether it's page, column, or row, move them back up the point of view, and then drag them in the order in which you want them to appear. Pages, columns, and rows. Anybody that's from EBS, really many other tool sets, those are the same tool sets or building blocks that you have in all those other reports. A report is really just a cross-section of columns and rows to present data back to you. All right. So what we have here is an unformatted preview. So we've got a real simple trial balance here. It's got revenues, expenses, total expenses. And this is kind of what the report's going to look like when you run it. As I said, the tool is WYSIWYG. We put a prompt for company, so that means when we run this report in FRS, the system will ask us which company you want to run the report for. On the left-hand side, we just have our accounts. A thing to note here, especially if you're from the EBS world, best practice is to have a parent account or a tree level for each grouping that you want to have on your income statement or balance sheet. So if we have 25 expense natural accounts that we want to fall in that G5010, we need a parent for that. The reason for that is when you put multiple children in a single line in SmartView or in FRS, it actually does not group those. It actually will expand them out. So if you put a single row with 5 expense accounts in it, you'll actually get 5 rows that will print on the report. So if you want those 5 expense lines summarized, you do need a parent account for them. In the columns, we just have our period. We also have a calculation there in the middle called percentage of revenue, and we've got our amount types, period to date and year to date. And finally at the top, those are our points of view. Again, we can run those and change those at runtime. When you run the report, if you have allowed the system to expand, there'll be a little caret next to each line. The expansion is an option you select when you're building the report, and that just means if there are children below a parent account, you can click that caret and they will expand. Any item that you have allowed to drill through will have a little underscore under it. So if we decided when we were creating this report we didn't allow users to drill from it, we would uncheck that or turn that option off, and they would not be able to drill from this data. All right, so a little bit about conditional formatting. By default, Oracle, just like FRS or FSGs, liabilities are formatted with their natural balance. So if you have a liability for accounts payable, for example, that has a credit balance, that will show up as a negative. And negative assets will show up as negative. So, usually what people like to do is they like to have things show up as, assets should show up as a positive, liabilities should show up as a positive, unless it's a debit balance or a contra balance, and then you want it to show as a negative. So this is what a trial balance looks like with no formatting. What's a quick way to do this and make the formatting easy? We can use something called conditional formatting. So in order to do that, we'll select one of the rows or groups of rows we want to format. You can right-click, and then a little pop-up window will come up. We have an option to format or use something called conditional formatting. Under Format Cells, we can change our numbers so that we can have negative numbers show in red, positive numbers have no formatting, and negative numbers show with with parentheses. But here's the benefit of a conditional format. If we do a conditional format, we can say if a member name, and this makes an assumption that all liabilities start with a 2, owner's equity starts with a 3, and all revenue accounts will start with a 4. So we did this little conditional format that says if it starts with 2, 3, or 4, meaning the account value, we're going to have a negative show with the parentheses and display in red. But here's the key point. We scaled the values by -1. So we said for display purposes only, multiply it by a -1. So what that means is that a liability with a credit balance will show as a positive because it's showing we want a liability to display, but a liability with a debit balance would show as a negative. Okay, so our condition is based on member name, count as a dimension, and it starts with a 2. That means it's a liability. Scale the value by a -1. And this is what it looks like. So now liabilities, accounts payable, is a $251,000 credit balance. It shows as a positive, which means we know it's a normal liability. But the 220050 has actually got a debit balance, so it shows as a negative. And the really cool thing about conditional formatting is you can do it. You can do it on one group of lines, and you don't have to go back and touch it. All right, next little trick is we're going to show you how to get multiple columns in one. The general rule of thumb with Financial Reporting Studio is the least columns you have, the better. So if we can get multiple companies or multiple periods in one column, we'd like to do that. And how you do that is use this thing called a range and a relative member. That's a nested function. So we're going to insert a row. I'm going to double click on the accounting period because what this is going to do is we're going to have a column here that gets multiple periods in a single column. So we're going to use a relative member in order to do this. We're going to select the functions and select range, and the starting range is going to be our relative member. And it's going to ask what relative member we want to start with. Well, the way we're going to build this report is we're going to say start column 1 with my period from 11 months ago, and then my last column will be my current point of view period. So the ending value is select the current point of view. That just means whatever period you're going to use to run this report. That'll be my last column. And my first column is just going to be offset by -11. So the nice thing about this, it's dynamic. If you run this for May, the report's automatically going to come back with May in the last column, and the first column will be June. If you run it for September, the first column would be August, and the last column would be September. So it is dynamic. So from that one single column, we're able to generate a report that spits across May all the way across to the other periods. So the nice thing about that is you can do it quickly, get multiple columns from a single column, and it's less formatting that you have to do. All right, talk a little about using SmartView. As I said earlier, SmartView is an Excel plugin. It also plugs into Microsoft Word and Microsoft PowerPoint. So it's a plugin for the Microsoft products and allows you to do a lot of different things connecting to Essbase. This deck will be available from the OUG, so I'm not going to go through and read all these different objects, but I will note you don't have access to all these icons. If you're using Essbase natively, meaning you're using SmartView against a custom Essbase application, you obviously have access to all these different tools. In the cloud, you only have access to certain of them. What we recommend you do when you use SmartView is you create something called a master sheet. And the reason for that is when you go into SmartView, all of your dimensions show up empty, so you don't get any data back. So we like to have you create a master sheet with the required dimensions already completed so that you can open up a sheet and at least get some data back and then just change it for the analysis you need to do. So how do you go about doing this? Once you connect to SmartView, you're going to get a sheet that should look similar to the one at the very top there. The first thing I like people to do is move their natural account to the row and the accounting period to the column. You certainly don't have to do that, but just from a typical profit and loss or balance sheet perspective, you're probably used to seeing the accounts on the rows and the periods in the columns. So you always pivot natural account over to the rows first, and then you can pivot the accounting period up top. And the reason for that is you have to have some value in the rows or you're going to get an error. So we pivot natural account first. We then click on the accounting period and pivot that up top. Once that's done, you have to fill in the required values. So scenario is required. You will not get any data if that's not filled in. Examples of scenario could be actual, allocation, total for allocations, budget, or forecast. Balance amount, one example you can use is base. 3 other examples you can use is period to date, year to date, or quarter to date. The reason I like to use base, if you use base, whatever amount you pick for amount type will tie to your balance amount. So if you pick year to date here, it knows your balance amount should be year to date. If your amount type was quarter to date, it knows your balance amount should be quarter to date. Currency has to be selected. We just have US dollars in this example. If your functional currency is Canadian dollars or euros, you can certainly pick that. Currency type. There are generally 3 types you have to worry about. Entered. Entered is the transactional's entered currency. So if you have a primary functional currency of US dollars in your ledger, but you enter a transaction in Canadian dollars, if you enter a currency type of entered, that Canadian dollar transaction would be excluded because it was entered in Canadian dollars. If you enter converted, it would be only those transactions that were converted, whereas if you enter total, that will bring back any transactions that were entered in U.S. dollars or transactions that were converted to U.S. dollars. So I usually recommend that people use total. Ledgers required. If you have multiple ledgers, you have to pick one or pick a ledger set, and then finally you have to pick an accounting period. Accounting period is required. If you do fill in all 7 of those dimensions, no matter how big your chart of account is, whether it's 5 segments or 25 segments, once those are filled in, you should at least get values back. All right. Finally, we're going to talk about OTBI and InfoLets. So all cloud the tools are available for download. That is the same. That has not changed. So well, FRS is now a cloud tool. The OTBI tools are still desktop tools. There's a BI Publisher tool, and there's also an OBI Excel plugin if you'd like to use that. Only download the client tools from the instance that you are connecting to. There can be subtle version releases. I've noticed this quite a bit. I've had multiple clients that are on release 11, but for whatever reason I can connect to one client using one set of tools, but I cannot connect to another. What I've seen pretty standard is when I uninstall the tools, download them from the client at which I'm working, I'm able to connect no problem. A good recommendation would be is to use a virtual machine. I do this quite frequently. I use Oracle VirtualBox. So that means I have a VM for client 1 and a different VM for client 2. And it just saves myself a little bit of effort when I'm switching in between clients. So a little bit of background about BI Publisher. It was originally released in R12. They did backport it to 11i. It's high volume, highly formatted transaction-based reports. So if you need to produce a check or a receivables invoice, government forms, you typically will have that created to BI Publisher. It does generate pixel-perfect reports. You can use Microsoft Word. You can also use Adobe. So if you have highly formatted, highly detailed forms that you need to generate, you can create a template using Adobe and have BI Publisher fill that data in for you. So just as we discussed, you can download BI Publisher right from the OBI OTBI toolkit that's within Oracle Cloud. So how does it work? So BI Publisher in Cloud works exactly the same way that it works in EBS. You generate a report. So in EBS, you still had a tool called Report Designer. In Oracle Cloud, you have a tool that will generate a data definition. What's interesting is if you've not used Oracle Cloud yet, if you're an old reports guy, the first time you create a data definition in Cloud, it's going to remind you very much of the Oracle Report Designer tool. It looks almost exactly the same. You have options for creating a data definition. You have options for creating parameters, lists of values, bursting. So real similar functionality. But at the end of the day, you create a data definition that will generate an XML extract, and you create a Word template that you put on top of it. When you publish that Word template, it comes out and it goes into a formatted check. If you can create multiple templates, so you can have multiple different options or multiple different outputs. You can have one output that goes to Word, one output that goes to Excel, and when you run the report, when you publish it, you have the options of picking which template you would like to use. Correlated to BI Publisher, there's this Oracle Transactional Business Intelligence tool. It's called OTBI. And it really is designed for operational users. You can create reports, dashboards, all different kinds of reporting elements from this tool. It's very popular, very powerful. It is used to evaluate against real-time data. So you can use this to report against OTBI areas that are refreshed automatically from the system. There's no delay. As you book transactions, they are reflected in the OTBI area. There are also certain OTBI areas that report against the Essbase cube. So there are two general ledger business areas. One is called Oracle Transactional Business Intelligence. It's general ledger transactions. And then there's a reporting area called general ledger balances. General ledger balances in the OTBI area goes against the Essbase cube. So if you're looking to do a little bit more robust reporting than you can get out of SmartView, you can do that using OTBI. There are hundreds of sample reports in OTBI. You can get very creative with these reports. You can also use the scheduling tool to schedule them. So those reports can be scheduled and run. They can be used to generate alerts. So if you want to generate email alerts or have agents run or bots, those can be created through OTBI and have Oracle reports go out, and users can act upon them. So if you want users to get a report that is actionable, has an HTML link, you can certainly do that through OTBI. And the great thing is all these tools, if you're an Oracle Cloud user, they are embedded within your cloud license. So you get OTBI, it's a license, it's licensed along with financials. BI Publisher is a tool that you get, Essbase and Financial Reporting Studio, all included with Oracle Cloud Financials. What we have here is just an example of some of the analytical areas. So the subject areas are denoted by the little box. They have a name. Real-time denotes exactly that they are indeed real-time. Recently, Oracle has gotten rid of what were relics of what was an on-prem solution. So there were certain business areas that were still enabled that were relics of when Oracle Fusion was an on-prem solution. If you're a cloud customer, you only have access to those business areas that say real-time. I will note there is another product that Oracle sells called BIX, or Business Intelligence Cloud Service. That is also based on OTBI. You can use that tool to report off of custom data areas. So if you want to report off of custom data, meaning data that does not come from the Oracle environment, but comes from another data source, you can integrate Oracle BIX and run reports off of that. Just some examples of some great reporting you can get out of Oracle Transactional Business Intelligence. So this is kind of what I was referring to at the start of the presentation, which is the ability to create custom data. So you have your data sources that you can use, and these are all available in cloud. So you can actually write a query. If you have a very large Excel file that is accessible to the cloud and the public internet, you could actually write a query and bring that in and write a report from it. You can write SQL. So this SQL goes against the Oracle database. There are 3 databases that you can access: the Financials database, the CX database, or the HCM database. You can do an LDAP or an MDX query. You can also execute an Endeca query. You can execute an Oracle BI analysis. That's really for pre-builts, but you can also get from HTTP calls. So if you have data that's available as XML via an HTTP feed, whether that's sitting on an internal server or an externally available server, you can certainly bring that in and write a report off of it. How you get to this is you access reports and analytics from your navigator, and then on the right-hand side there's a little book that's your BI catalog. If you click on that BI catalog, it will open up a separate reporting page, and from that reporting page you can create what's called a data model. Analysis or dashboards are used to create information against predefined data elements, but the data model, as I said, is used to create your own custom SQL. Once that comes up, you have the option of either writing your SQL. So if you know your SQL, you can just select star from Dual or select 1 from Dual if you know it. If you don't know it, you can use a query builder tool. And this is what I was referring to a few minutes ago. The query builder tool looks really similar to the Oracle Report Designer from the EBS days. So you can have queries, multiple queries, join those queries together, and sum your functions or aggregate them using sum or diff or max or average, any SQL function that's available. Once you've gotten your query, you can save sample data. The reason that you do that is so that you can create a BI Publisher template. It's easiest to create a BI Publisher template when you have sample data so that Oracle can render it for you and you can see how it's going to look when you're completed. From that data model, you then can create a report. You can upload a spreadsheet, as I said earlier. You can create the data model. That's what we just did with the SQL statement. Or you can create a subject area. The subject area would be is if you wanted to take data that's available in OTBI, but publish it or run it using BI Publisher. On the left-hand side, you have the properties. So there's the data sets. There's our GL balances. Flex fields, listed values, parameters, and bursting. Again, for those developers that are on the phone, this should look very familiar to you because it really is similar to Oracle Reports Designer. You can create parameters. The parameters exactly the same way that you do in SQL. You would create a parameter using a bind variable. So if your variable is, P1, you'll say where period name equals colon P1, and then you would create a parameter named colon P1, and that is how you bind them. It works just the same way as. And this is just a real quick example of a report that we got from the system. We have a table at the bottom, and we have a real simple chart at the very top that's going to come out, and we can print that and do whatever we would need with it. Notice at the top you've got different types of charts that you can create. You can create a gauge or a pivot table or an image, and all those are out of the box. So with the charts, you get pie charts, you get bar charts, row charts, and 3D spiderweb charts, and you also get gauges, so you can create stoplight reporting and gauge reporting right from BI Publisher. So that was a quick tour around the Oracle Financials Cloud. It is a lot of content. When I gave this presentation in Las Vegas a few weeks ago, we did have a number of questions. So I wanted to make sure we left some time. We're supposed to go till 10 to 2, so we left about 12 minutes for questions. So Colin, I want to kind of hand it back to you and just see if we had any questions from the audience.
Hey, Tom. But I'll leave it open for a few minutes. If anyone does have any questions, please go ahead and type them into the questions box on your control panel, and we will answer them with the time we have left. If there are no questions, we'll give you guys back some time in your day, but we will wait around for a few of those. Thank you. All right, Thomas, we have one come in. How would you rate these tools as compared to FSGs?
It's a lot better than FSGs. I will tell you, the principles are the same. Really, because you have row sets in FSGs, you have column sets, you have content sets, which act as kind of like the page functions. Once you learn how to use it, it's really the similar principles. As far as getting data out, I like it a lot better. The thing that I missed about FSGs is from 11i with client-side ADI, it was really easy to get multiple reports into an Excel spreadsheet. If you need to do that, SmartView can handle it. So, you just kind of how to use it. SmartView's got this really cool functionality called a cascade, and that cascade allows you to get multiple pages across different dimensions from a single report. So I like it a lot better. It did take, the learning curve was a little steeper. I'll tell you, I picked up FSGs in like 2 days. It took me about 2 weeks or so to get really good with this tool. But once you do, I think you'll find it's a lot more powerful. Great question.
Okay, and can these tools be used on-premise?
So some of them can. So if you're running EBS, Oracle released a tool, I think about 18 months ago, called Financial Accounting Reporting Hub. It's similar to Accounting Hub. It uses accounting, but what it does is it's a cloud environment. You buy the package. Oracle gives you a patch to download, and that patch asks you to put in the URL of your cloud environment. Once you do that, it actually moves your GL balances up into the cloud, and you get some of the GL analysis tools in the cloud. So if you use that tool, you could use Essbase and Financial Reporting Studio as your reporting tools, and you could use OTBI off of GL balances. So it's a really good starting point if you're not sure if cloud's right for you, or if there's certain requirements that you have, like lease management or property management, that Oracle doesn't yet have a great cloud solution for. That Financial Accounting Reporting Hub is a really great place to start, and it's a real quick implementation. It allows you to access some of this great reporting and still have an on-prem solution.
Okay, and someone did ask if we could mail this presentation or if it was going to be online, and I do want to let everyone know again that yes, this presentation is being recorded and will be online within the next 24 hours on the OAUG website. And back to the questions, Thomas, can you comment on how to tackle integration of on-premise EBS sources, OM or AR, with Cloud Revenue Manager in a single report?
Well, that's a loaded question. So it's the way revenue management works, and I assume you're talking about Oracle Revenue Management. The way revenue management works is assuming you have your revenue, your order management sources, order management. Once you install revenue management, there's like a flag, a profile option that you set in EBS that tells the system you're using revenue management. What that does is it creates an additional revenue type in AR so that all of your revenue goes into a different bucket. So instead of having an unbilled or unearned or a revenue bucket, it goes into a bucket called Other. And that Other is essentially a clearing account. And what revenue management does is it brings all your information up into it, and it does your VAR calculations or your vendor-specific objective evidence or whatever else it has to do. Then it'll send a journal entry into Oracle General Ledger. With regards to reporting, Oracle Revenue Management does come with some reports. It is a cloud product, so OTBI is available. BI Publisher is available. Obviously, there's no Essbase because it's not balances. So BI Publisher and OTBI would be available for Cloud Revenue Management. If you needed consolidated reporting, meaning you needed reporting from Order Management, AR, and Revenue Management, then the cloud solution for that would probably be BICS, Business Intelligence Cloud Service, because that supports bringing in data from multiple sources.
Thanks, Thomas. Again, if there are any more questions, please go ahead and type them in now while we have Thomas on the line. Thank you. Okay, well, it seems that's all the questions we have for today. Again, if anyone does have any questions later on that they couldn't think of right now, feel free to reach out. Again, this webinar is being recorded and it will be online. Also, please check out our other upcoming webinars that are posted on our e-learning page of oaug.org. I'd like to thank everyone for attending today's session. Also, I'd like to thank Thomas for taking time out of his schedule to present with us. So, hope everyone has a great rest of your day, and we look forward to seeing you on our next webinar. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much.